Thank you for joining us at the Evolution of Medicine Summit. A warm welcome. We wanted to make a specific thank you to our sponsors that have made this event possible. Energetics, an innovative natural remedy and supplement company, is committed to revitalizing medicine, and Cyrex Labs, a clinical immunology laboratory specializing in functional immunology and autoimmunity. Most of all, thank you for listening. If you'd like to share this with your colleagues and friends on Facebook if you enjoy the content, and if you have questions, you can ask us on Twitter with the hashtag EvoMed. Finally, if you really want to play your part in accelerating the evolution of medicine, ask your doctor if the Evolution of Medicine Summit might be right for them. Thank you and enjoy.
Hello and welcome back to the Evolution of Medicine Summit. This is your host James Maskell, and we are in the physician education part of the summit. It's the weekend and we are looking at some of the clinical aspects of the evolution of medicine, and I am very excited to present to everyone today the doctor that we have today, Dr. Derrick DeSilva. Dr. DeSilva is on the teaching faculty of the JFK Medical Center in Edison, New Jersey. He's also the co-chairman of the Department of Integrated Medicine at the Raritan Bay Medical Center. He's the chairman of the Age Management Medicine Group, as well as the past president of the American Nutraceutical Association. And if the name is familiar, you may have heard him. He's the host of Ask the Doctor on WCTC Radio and the medical correspondent for Cablevision, which is Channel 12 in New Jersey. So, Doc, such a pleasure to have you here on the Evolution of Medicine Summit. Thank you so much for making time.
My pleasure, James. Thank you.
So I wanted to talk a little bit today about drugs and pharmacy, because obviously the drugs and pharmacy has been a big part of sort of like the evolution of medicine up until here. And it seems to be one of the things that maybe has sort of slowed the evolution of medicine up until this point. And it's pretty clear at this point that America has a pretty serious prescription drug problem. Just for those, I'm sure every doctor on the line knows that, but just to give a little context, what do you see as the sort of the scope of the problem?
70% of people in this country are on at least one prescription medication. 20% of people in this country are on 5 or more prescription drugs in this country. That's where the problem is. We start a prescription with no end in sight. Whereas what I think physicians need to do, what I've been doing, and I've been doing this for 26 years. This is my 26th year in medicine. Yeah. And I started this way, that I started to tell people, look, when you start a prescription medication, we are looking at when you're going to get off. What is your end point? Yeah. And that is really what I work towards. That's
obviously extremely important. So from a scientific point of view, if you're on a combination of drugs, is it likely that combination of drugs is scientifically valid?
Well, let me back up one step to take this a different way. Every single prescription medication depletes the body of a nutrient. We know that. Okay. That is very well known. Yeah. As an example, if you're on a water pill, if you're on a diuretic, we know that what gets depleted from the body is potassium. And we've, for 100 years, we have been taught in medical school, during residency, during our training, that if you're on a water pill, the person needs to have potassium, or you need to make sure you check their electrolytes. But it isn't just the diuretic. It is all prescription medications deplete the body of various nutrients. So to answer your question, yes, it becomes a cumulative problem. You're on a diuretic for blood pressure. You're on something for your diabetes. You're on something for your stomach. You're on something for your blood pressure. So this whole thing evolves, and at the end of the day, you're on 5 drugs, and there is a list of 15 to 20 different nutrients that the body gets depleted of.
Wow. And so how long does that take to actually lead to a side effect or something that comes as a result of that?
Some things can be very immediate. For example, let's go back to the diuretic issue of the potassium. If you're on a water pill the potassium can get depleted within days.
Yeah.
If you're on a statin drug, which is to lower cholesterol, it can happen over a 2-week, a 1-month, or even a 3-month period. So depending on the drug, and then some other drugs, for example, like the PPIs, the proton pump inhibitors that block acid, we now know that after a 10-year period, your risk of fractures, hip fracture, spine fracture, femur fracture are significantly increased because you're depleting the body of calcium and you're depleting the body of magnesium. So it's a horrible, horrible thing that's going on that we need to become much more aware of as physicians.
So how do those nutrient deficiencies end up turning into diseases?
Well, what happens is that when you have a nutrient depletion, the disease that is produced could be anything from a fall, for example. Let's say that we'll go back again to the diuretic, you're on a water pill.
Yeah.
Your potassium level comes down, right?
Yeah.
If your potassium comes down, what's going to happen is you're going to end up developing what is called a cardiac arrhythmia. The cardiac arrhythmia, whether it be PVCs, APCs, or atrial fibrillation, is a definite possibility. So now you go into the hospital, you're having palpitations, you may be having chest pain, you may just be feeling overall crummy. You end up in the hospital, what do they start treating you for? They start treating you for that arrhythmia when it's really the potassium or the magnesium depletion that it has caused. Blood pressure, all right? All of a sudden your blood pressure goes up. Well, is it because your body's depleted of magnesium? Maybe you need some more coenzyme Q10. So this all evolves into managing the initial disease more, and I don't like to use the word holistically, but more integratively with nutrients and diet and supplements, and then start managing the disease a little bit better.
So what do you see as the optimal role for drugs in a really evolved medical system?
I think the role of drugs in an evolved, like the way you referred to the word evolved medical system, is if you have high blood pressure and you come in to see me and your blood pressure is 160 over 110, I'm not going to send you home on magnesium. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start you on send you to the hospital, put you on some prescription medications, and then really kick your butt. Really insist on changing your diet, losing the weight, getting rid of the salt, and getting rid of all the junk that's producing the inflammation that's producing the disease.
Yeah.
So in an evolved medical system model, what I see is short-term prescription medications, long-term nutrients, long-term diet, long-term lifestyle.
That's great. Well, I think that's definitely the direction that we're headed. So I know that there's a sort of a trend of patients coming in sort of, I think, having a visceral reaction to the fact that they're on these drugs, and they sort of see the ads and they know that there are side effects, and they read the side of the labels where it says these side effects may occur, and they want to get off these drugs. Do current physicians have the skill set to be able to understand how to take patients through that with the current medical training?
You know what, James? I am not sure that it's a matter of skill set or if it's a matter of time.
Okay.
And I think it's a combination of the two.
Okay.
I think primarily it's time over skill set, because I really do believe that through seminars like this, through conferences like AMMG, which I'm the chairman of, there are ways that physicians can learn to do this.
Okay.
My concern is that this takes time.
Yeah.
When you come in to see me as a patient and I say to you, you need to do this, 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 and this to manage your blood sugar or blood pressure better, that's going to take time. Yeah. I've got to sit down and go over with you why sugar is bad. I've got to go over with you why you need to take a probiotic, why you need to use coenzyme Q10, why you need to use some chromium, etc., as part of your daily regimen. And that's where the issue is that the physicians can develop the skill set, but how they're going to make the time.
Absolutely. And during our doctor conference this weekend, we do have practitioners who have been speaking about exactly those kind of things, like how do we actually do this kind of medicine? Because I think what you're talking about, the fact is that any medicine that's not just differential diagnosis and drugs does take time, and it does take engagement with the patient, and lifestyle medicine does take that sort of engagement. I hope that with the technological revolution, there may be ways to organize that, and we'll be certainly speaking about that more. So let's just say, for all the physicians who are out there who want to do this, because I think most physicians really want the best for their patients, or all probably want the best for their patients, and so forth. What would be some sort of step-by-step guides that you would have for physicians to be able to see the whole patient, understand the way that drugs lead to side effects, and to put together a plan for people to get back to rude health?
I think it needs to be get comfortable with 2 or 3 things. So, very simply, the number one used prescription, over-the-counter prescription, if you will, in this country are the acid blockers. Okay? Let's start there.
Yep.
Every single person that comes in that is on a PPI, a proton pump inhibitor, or an acid blocker, that for the person that has digestive problems, pay attention to, number one, what are they doing? What are they eating? Why are they having this reflux? Why is this happening? Is it because they are not eating well? Is it because they're eating too much sugar? Is it because there's a lot of stress in their life? What is it? That's number one. Yeah. So for every person that comes in that is on an acid blocker, put them on a good probiotic. Okay. I am not talking about eating yogurt. That is not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay? I am talking about a good probiotic. And I've worked with this. I've developed my own line. I've done all of these things. So let's start there. Okay. With a good probiotic with good technology. And very simply, what I want you to tell the physicians to do is to first, for that month, take them off the sugar, the cookies, the candy, the ice cream, the white bread, the pasta, the flour, and all the garbage.
Yeah.
More vegetables and more protein. Okay? However you want to frame that is fine. Complex carbs, vegetables, and protein.
Okay.
That's fine, however that happens. For that first month, bring them back in a month, and then say to them, I want you to start taking your medication, your PPI, your proton pump inhibitor, every other day.
Okay.
After that, very simply, evolve into take it when you need it. Because all of this time, you're on the probiotic, you're on the good bacteria. Let it get into your system over a month or 2 months, and then the people won't need it.
Yeah.
They won't need it. That's number one. Number two, anybody that is on a statin drug, any of the cholesterol-lowering drugs, put them on some coenzyme Q10.
Yeah.
Very simple. Put them on some coenzyme Q10, and last but not least, make sure that everybody's vitamin D levels checked. Remember, the lab says an optimal level, a normal reference range is between 30 and 100. Yeah. How ridiculous is that? 30, so if you're 31, you're normal? No. Okay. You need to get into the 50, 60, 70 range on the vitamin D level. Just those 3 things, and obviously omega-3s, etc., just those 3 things is the way to start.
So it sounds like what you're doing is sort of titrating out the drugs and putting in the diet, because I think a lot of people and physicians would get scared of taking people off drugs, but it sounds like what you're doing is more of a gradual shift across.
Absolutely, and that's a great point. If you're a diabetic and you are 50 pounds overweight, I am not going to be able to stop your diabetes medications. It's not going to happen. But what you will do is take that gradual weight loss down, and I use this with my patients all the time. They come in and they say to me, and I say to them, well, tell me about what you're eating and keep a log of what you're eating, and I'll see things like birthday party, ice cream, cake. No, that's not acceptable. Yeah. And I think we as physicians have got to be more persistent and insistent to tell these people, if you're an alcoholic, is it okay to have a drink at a birthday party? No, it's not okay to have a drink at a birthday party. And it's not okay to have chocolate or ice cream at your birthday party if you're a diabetic. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to become more insistent on disciplining our patients on how to do this.
It's amazing that you mentioned sugar, actually, because during the summit we had Jennifer Milkey, who works for Dr. Frank Littman, talking about how to get people off sugar, and that was really for patients. And it seems like, with sugar, particularly in America, it's sort of like this enabling culture, whereas it's very acceptable to bring a 12-pack of donuts to the hospital with someone who's been sick, even if they have diabetes, whereas obviously, like you said, it's not okay for it wouldn't be okay for an alcoholic to have to have a drink. It's not, sugar, we don't see it in that light, but Mark Hyman actually recently just said, he said sugar's great, but we just need to treat it like a recreational drug.
It is. Sugar, James, is more addicting than heroin or cocaine.
Wow.
It is easier, believe it or not, to get off of heroin and cocaine than it is to get off of sugar. It is the most addicting substance on the planet. And I've got a really great graphic of a needle and somebody pulling up sugar into the needle and injecting it into themselves, because it's the same thing.
Yeah.
We treat it as something that's acceptable. It's exactly. If somebody is in an alcohol unit and we're going to visit them, we think nothing of taking, as you said, a box of donuts. But what about that same unit where there are diabetics there? Would it be okay to take a bottle of alcohol, a bottle of scotch, into the unit, or a bottle of wine? It's not acceptable.
No.
And it's the same principle. It's the same thing.
Exactly. So you mentioned a few, I want to get back into the drug point, because I think that if physicians in America could really get good at this, I think this is the beginning of an evolved medical system. So you mentioned looking at all of those three specific drug categories you mentioned. I'm just interested to get your perspective, because it seems to me, I used to live in New Haven, Connecticut, and I would see people wanting to sign up for clinical trials in the hospital. But I've also read books and things that would say that people are on a bunch of different trials at the same time, and who exactly are these people that are sort of going on all these trials? And it seems to me that as soon as you start as a patient, as soon as you start taking a combination of all different types of drugs, you're sort of putting a little bit of science on top of each other, and at the end, have those combinations of drugs actually being tested on people as far as their safety? I mean, are studies being done on the sort of cumulative effects of, one drug company's one drug plus another company this? It doesn't seem like that's happening.
No, I don't think that has happened. I don't think anybody has looked at the role of what you're alluding to is called polypharmacy.
Yeah.
The role of polypharmacy. See, this is part of the problem, is that we look at each one of the drugs as a separate entity, and they're not. Because, as I mentioned in the beginning, the diabetic, right, is going to be on at least 2 drugs.
Yeah.
That same diabetic is going to have stomach problems because they have reflux and gastrointestinal problems because of the overgrowth of candida or the overgrowth of the bad yeast in their system.
Yeah.
So now they're on a proton pump inhibitor, right? They're an acid blocker. Most of the time they're overweight, they're going to have high blood pressure, right?
Yeah.
They're definitely going to have a high cholesterol, so the doctor's going to have them on a cholesterol drug. We're up to 4 already.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, what's happening is that perhaps they're having trouble sleeping because they're overweight and they've got sleep apnea. So now they're on a 5th drug, like a sleep medication. So now they're on 5 drugs.
And this is the standard of care.
Oh, this is standard of care. Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you don't do this, you can get shut down.
Well, the problem is that it's not so much if you don't do this, you get shut down. I think the issue is that if you spend the time and explain to people what is going on, they tend to understand because innately people know that this is not a good thing.
Yeah.
This is not a good thing, what I'm doing. So here's what I do. What I tell my patients is this: I'm going to give you 3 to 6 months to get your act together. Because you know what? Insurance companies and everybody's now looking at me, looking at my outcome data. And I say to them, don't mess me up. Don't ruin my statistics. Get your act together and do what you're supposed to do. And you know what? They do. 80% of the people that I talk to that I am insistent that this is what they do it. The 20% that don't, that go away and see somebody else, a large percentage of those people eventually end up coming back to me.
Because they know what the real problem is.
Because they know what the problem is.
Yeah.
And they realize, and we as physicians, excuse me for saying this, but have to give a you know what.
Yeah.
All right? We have to give a darn.
Yeah.
All right, there's another word I was going to use, but my mother told me not to curse. So
You're such a pro on TV and radio.
we have to give a darn.
Yeah.
We really do, And I think once people realize that we care as physicians, they will start to care. And innately, we start to connect energetically, and just the universe brings us together.
Yeah, it's a great thing, and I think certain patients will react differently. Some people probably need that sort of patriarchal, like, this is what's best for you. Other people probably need people to ask them the questions, so it comes from them, so it's sort of like their idea.
Yes.
But that's part of the work of the physician and their team, is to inspire. I always think that the best thing that we can do is inspire the patient to want to be healthy, and then they'll find out the stuff for themselves. But you're sort of guiding that process, and it's really important.
There's no question. There's no question that we have to guide the process of going through this. But a lot of people say to me, and a lot of the physicians that I've spoken to will say, why do we need to take vitamins? Why is this even beginning? Why is this even happening? And here's why. You're a lot younger than me, okay? But when I was in grade school, in the 60s, in the mid to late 60s. When I was in grade school, when I was in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, nobody that I can think of in my class was on a prescription medication.
Yeah.
Nobody. I'm 57 years old, so that's how far this goes back. Today,
yeah,
the nurses, and a lot of the nurses that I see that are school nurses, you know what they say to me? Dr. DeSilva, all I do is give out prescription medication all day. Yeah. I'm giving out Adderall, I'm giving out asthma medication, I'm giving out blood pressure medication, I'm giving out stomach medication, I'm giving out diabetes medication. This is unheard of 45 years ago.
Yeah.
So here's what's happening, James. What's happening is diseases that we saw in our 60s and 70s 40, 50 years ago, we're now starting to see in our 20s and 30s. Why? Because of the nutrient depletions in our body.
Can nutrient depletions be transgenerational? If the parents had significant nutrient deficiencies, is any of that passed on? Because we're seeing like transgenerational toxicity, transgenerational stress. I don't know what the answer is, but do you think that, or do you think it's just people start from scratch and just the food is terrible from day one?
No, I think that there is some transgenerational deficiency because mom gets pregnant.
Yeah.
Mom is nutrient depleted.
Yeah.
She doesn't do what she's supposed to do. She continues to smoke.
Yeah.
And she just has this horrible lifestyle. She's got all this stress.
Yeah.
She doesn't have appropriate levels of magnesium. She doesn't have appropriate levels of vitamin D. She doesn't have appropriate levels of omega-3, of essential fatty acids. She's got no antioxidants. She's got no probiotics in her system. I was just reading another article on probiotics,
Yeah.
which I really want to talk with you about. So part of it is because parents, mother and father, all right, because father contributes to sperm motility and fertilization and the whole thing, they're both so deficient and depleted that the baby's starting off deficient, and then the baby gets sick, and now all of a sudden the baby's on digestive medications, et cetera, et cetera. So it just perpetuates. And then also, don't forget the food. Our food doesn't have the nutrients. We're microwaving everything. We're killing all the nutrients. So this vicious cycle starts to happen. We have to break the cycle.
And you're right in the middle of sort of like the central zone here, because New Jersey, if you look at the statistics of 1 in 25 boys on the autism spectrum or otherwise, this is an epicenter of environmental illness, isn't it?
It truly is. And the question is why?
Yeah.
Why is this happening?
Yeah.
And my answer is, there's no question in my mind that it is environmental. And if we don't get our acts together quickly, and if we as physicians don't start talking to our patients more authoritatively and spending the time with them, we're going to be in big trouble. We've got to get the sugar out. We've got to be more careful on how and when we write those prescriptions. We're so easy and we're so free to write that prescription for Xanax or for Percocet or diabetes medicine, when what we need to do is we need to say, okay, what's your vitamin D level? What is your cholesterol really? What are the ratios really? How much do we really need to take these numbers down?
Yep.
What can I do more to get rid of the tire business that most people are in, the Dunlop business that the people are in with that gut? It's got to go. Because as soon as this goes, you're going to improve. Your health is going to improve. And we have got to insist on that.
Yeah. Well, it's such a big point, and I think that it is really the evolution of medicine to get into those kind of conversations. You spoke about probiotics earlier, and surely, with the new science on the microbiome and so forth, the antibiotic is, sort of the most obvious example of an interaction that has long-term negative side effects. And given all of the science that's coming out and all the things that the microbiome affects, from the brain, all the inflammation, the inflammatory pathways, it seems like if there's one thing that, polypharmacy and one thing that could be really actionable and needs action is a better understanding of appropriate use of antibiotics. I'm sure, being in your world, you've seen this shift over a period of time. Do you see any signs that this is, the big concerns that the WHO, they're saying, the deputy director of the CDC just said that we've reached the end of the antibiotics era. Do you see that changing physician behavior yet, or are we still in that time lag where it's not catching up with physician behavior?
I don't think it's caught up yet. I really don't think it's caught up yet. My number one recommendation for better health is a good probiotic. Okay. Is the good bacteria. It is my number one recommendation for better health. Why? 70% of your immune system resides in your intestines. All right? The good bacteria are responsible for digestion, they're responsible for elimination, and they make most, if not all, of the B vitamins in our system. Here's something that's really interesting. You mentioned the whole brain-gut connection.
Yeah.
David Perlmutter talks about this all the time, and we've heard him mention this.
Yeah.
And I heard David say this, oh my goodness, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
In fact, I heard his father talking about this. That's how long I've been around.
Wow.
Okay? So when we talk about the brain-gut connection, we know that there are more nerve connections in the gut, in the digestive tract, than in any other part of the body except the brain. Okay. It is called the second brain. Yeah. Our gut is called the second brain. And there's a reason for that, because so much goes on in there. But let's go back to a question that you asked me about transgenerational diseases, if you will.
Yeah.
Do you realize that, and this was, by the way, in Scientific America Scientific America in either the May or the June issue, actually maybe in the June or July issue, where they talked about the microbiota.
Yeah.
Scientific America was talking about this, and I mentioned this probably 15 or 20 years ago when I started talking about the gut.
Wow.
Children that are born via C-section are much more susceptible to infection than children that are born vaginally. Why? I mean, I ask this question all the time, and I'll ask the question of you, and I'll ask the question of every other physician. Why do you think that happens?
I mean, I know why.
Okay, good, because you've interviewed everybody and their grandmother, I'm sure. But the reason is, and for the people and for the physicians and for the patients that are out there, is because the mother's vaginal tract is where the baby, where this wonderful new human being gets all of the good bacteria.
Yeah.
That's where it's the primary colonization for the gastrointestinal tract, for the digestive tract, when the baby comes through the birth canal.
Yeah.
So if the baby's born via C-section, where does the baby get the flora from? They don't. They're colonizing with all the antibiotic-resistant bacteria in the hospital. In the hospital, exactly. My sister gave birth to triplets 15 years ago. One of the first things that I did was took probiotics to the babies, to my two nieces and one nephew in the hospital when they were little. And that's something I did immediately because they were born via C-section. Yeah. And I knew that. So susceptibility to infection, moms, we've got to spend much more time and have much better conversations with mothers that are pregnant. We've got to spend much more time with our patients that are not taking probiotics. But probiotics to me, and the right probiotic, this is an important piece. And I developed the right probiotic with the right technology, with the right strains many years ago. 20 years ago, I worked on this technology, and that is what I use today. And once you start the right probiotic, it will change your life. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so you can see how with something like antibiotics, where you're really just sort of indiscriminately killing everything, there's, that the need for these kind of countermeasures are much more important. And it seems like the number of people that are on antibiotics or have taken them, I just saw some statistics about, I think the average 30-year-old has been on 40 courses or something like that. What hope is there for a good solid digestive tract that has such an impact on the rest of the body with those sort of numbers? I mean, it's crazy.
But you've got to go back and start at the beginning. Why did you have 40 courses of antibiotics? What was going on with your immune system? Did you know your vitamin D level? Now, I want to back up to one thing to make something very clear. There's no question that antibiotics have a role. Okay? There are 3 things that'll kill you like that: meningococcal meningitis, pneumococcal pneumonia, and Staph aureus. Any one of those that you have will kill you within 24 to 48 hours. All right? So making sure that your immune system is strengthened, and if you've got any one of those 3, absolutely, you need to take an antibiotic. You need to take an antibiotic, right? But when I'm in the hospital, when I'm making rounds and my residents and medical students are with me, they know that they need to write in the hospital a probiotic or the good bacteria when somebody's on an antibiotic. I just put them on it in the hospital anyway. But when we go back to the whole idea of probiotics and the good bacteria, the question still comes down to is, what's your immune system doing? If and I've done this with audiences, I go to the audiences and I say, how many of you know your cholesterol? 80, 90% will raise their hand, whether it be physicians or whether it be patients. But if I ask the question, how many of you know your vitamin D level? That number drops down to 20%. 20% of people know their vitamin D level. And for the physicians that are listening to this, or for the patients that are listening to this, I'll ask you that question. Do you know your cholesterol? I know you know your cholesterol, but do you know your vitamin D level? And where is that level? And when are you going to get that up into the 60-70 range or 50-60 range? It is more important for your immune system that you know your vitamin D level and you're taking a probiotic than anything out there. And by the way, vitamin D enhances something called apoptosis, meaning programmed cell death. If you have an abnormal cancer cell, if your levels of vitamin D are low, those cancer cells will not die. But if those levels of vitamin D are appropriate, where there should be, apoptosis or programmed cell death will happen. So these are just some simple, basic things that we need to do that are not being done.
What would you say, because I've heard through the events that I've done and had different doctors speak, is that it takes quite a lot of humility to practice this type of medicine for a doctor, because it's a lot easier to just see a symptom and hit a symptom, because that's just an easy job. You can do the differential diagnosis, you can say, okay, this is the symptom, you can add it on, whereas to take the kind of approach that you're talking about sort of requires a little bit of humility to understand the complex interactions of the body and how it works. If you're a physician and you're listening to this right now and you're like, look, I know I want to be doing this kind of medicine, I'm not doing this kind of medicine, and they see the value in it, what are some starting points that you would recommend to be able to, just start to even understand what the side effects are of the medications that people are taking and how to get them to a point? You mentioned the titration. I think that's a great strategy. But I don't think a lot of physicians understand these kind of synergistic pathways and feedback loops that you're talking about here. Where can you find out about that kind of stuff?
Well, I think you need to attend the right conferences.
Okay.
I think you need to listen to programs like this. And in speaking with you, you told me all the amazing people that you have, that Mark Hyman, Jeffrey Bland, all of those people that you have interviewed, and it's a pleasure to be here as part of that whole group. I think listening to what they have to say, I think going to the right conferences, going to things that Jeffrey Bland does, things that Mark Hyman does, things that AMMG, there are 4 physicians, the Age Management Medicine group, and if you don't mind, I'll, talk about that for a second, but we do educational seminars for physicians. Yeah. And I think you need to be in that environment of learning in order to make the brain synapses start to fire a different way. Yeah. Because if you're not, and you're at a regular conference, if you will, if a regular allopathic conference, your synapses just don't fire that way. And I think we've got to retrain the way the brain works. So I think it's just education. It's simple education.
Well, one of the things I hear from doctors who haven't made this shift, like I know a few doctors, one who comes to mind particularly, whose wife is an integrated medicine doctor. He's a dermatologist. He refers his hard cases across, the hard psoriasis cases, and she changes the diet, and guess what? It all goes away. But still, he doesn't want to be an integrative dermatologist because it's not acceptable in his dermatology conferences, and he's trying to grow up like that. I hear that quite a lot where, if you want to go to those other, the neurology conference or otherwise, I feel like we're just on the tipping point of being able to talk about how diet affects neurology, which up until this point has been, a non-talked about thing.
Well, I'm not sure I completely agree with that, because I was just invited to speak in Las Vegas this, the fall of 2014 at an aesthetic medicine conference. Okay. Plastic surgeons, dermatologists, and that do aesthetic medicine. What role does integrative medicine have in aesthetics? It has everything to do with aesthetics. Yeah. You just mentioned the dermatologist. That was a perfect, cue-in for me to talk about a segue into talk about exactly what we're doing here. Yeah. The skin is the largest organ of elimination in the body, all right? You are never going to improve the quality of your skin unless you change the inflammatory pathways in your body and get rid of the sugar, because it's an organ of elimination within the body. So I think that physicians realize that there is an evolution happening. Yeah. The physicians that are perhaps my age, that are in their late 50s, early 60s, mid 60s, that are getting ready to finish their career, they don't want to deal with this stuff. But the guys that are, and the ladies that are in their 30s and 40s, folks, if you don't make the change, if you don't make the shift, you're going to be standing on the corner and delivering groceries. I'm telling you right now, that's what's going to happen. Because I have been so busy for 25 years because I've done this from the beginning. Yeah. And now I can't spend enough time in my office to see enough people. I mean, it's so busy because this is what people want today. But learn the basics. And James, I'll tell you what the basics are. Okay. Number 1, learn probiotics. Okay. Learn how to use them. And it's very simple. Just have everybody take them. Okay. It's very simple because everybody needs them. Learn omega-3s, and I think most doctors are very comfortable with omega-3s, all right? Learn about omega-3s. Number 3, learn about vitamin D. Check the levels, give them the appropriate levels. Don't be afraid to give somebody 5,000, 6,000 IU of vitamin D, because it isn't about the dosage, it's about the level in the blood, all right? Don't be afraid of that. Once their level gets to the 50, 60 range and then they're on 6,000 or 8,000 IU of vitamin D, fine. Drop back the dose to 2,000 or 4,000. And last but not least, learn coenzyme Q10 with the statins. Because remember, coenzyme Q10 is depleted from the body by not only the statins, and this is very important, it's depleted by the statins, it's depleted by the oral hypoglycemic agents, it's depleted by the SSRIs, which are the antidepressants, and it's depleted by the beta blockers, which we use for blood pressure and for heart disease. Yep. So it isn't just the statins. Learn those 4 things. Learn probiotics, learn vitamin D, learn omega-3s, and learn how to use coenzyme Q10. And believe me, you'll be well on your way to improving your patient's quality of life.
Those are some great starting points. It seems like almost any doctor or primary care internist, specialist could could start to comprehend those and at least, work with those with the patients. It's not something so significant that it's not like learning a whole new system.
Not at all.
Because functional medicine is a bit of an new operating system for people to really get to cause. I'm interested, you said earlier you didn't like using the word holistic, and I really understand why, but it's a shame that word has sort of been bastardized in a certain way, because that's really what we're talking about, isn't it? It's really the interaction, the systems biology, the feedback loops, the way that the different parts of the body work together. And there's no real way of describing that better than holism, but the word holistic seems to have sort of stuck and strikes a wrong chord. Turns a lot of people off.
Well, I think the word for me, I like the word holistic because it is the whole body. It's a whole body system.
Yeah.
All right? We can't isolate. People try to isolate your digestive tract and your skin. Well, you can't.
Yeah.
They're the same. They work together.
Yeah.
You can't isolate your eyes from your brain. Well, the eyes are fat, the brain is fat.
Yeah.
All right? So it is a whole system, and in my practice, I've got an acupuncturist, I've got a massage therapist, we do meditation, we do hypnosis, we do Reiki, all of those, diet, nutrition, nutrients, we do all, spirituality.
Yeah.
We do all of those things in my own practice. So I particularly like the word an integrative approach.
Okay.
The word is, it integrates. We need a little bit of medicine from the East, but we need some medicine from the West also. We need Western medicine. We need Eastern medicine. Let's bring them both together. And what I've coined the term the best of both worlds is what I like to use. And that's what we need to do. It's a holistic, it's an integrative, it's a whole body experience. And everything around you, all the energy around you. And many years ago when I talked about energy, people looked at me like, what is this guy talking about?
Yeah.
That's why there's something called chanting.
Yeah.
It's changing the frequency of the way your cells vibrate. It's not so woo-woo today. It's real stuff, and it's being studied.
Yeah, that's certainly an interesting area, and I think that it's almost like if you look at all medicine from, on the very right-hand side, experimental drugs, using one drug to cure another disease that hasn't been used for, and if you look way on the left, you've got chanting and Reiki, and sort of somewhere in the middle is functional medicine, and we sort of seem to be moving left. And, we see now big organizations going for functional medicine because it's tangible and it's scientific and so forth, but I certainly see what you're saying is that, I think that it'll continue to move left, and once we understand the mechanism of some of those more energetic modalities, then we'll be able to really, we'll be able to see more of the value of it. You've obviously been in practice for a long time, but you've also spent a lot of time doing radio and TV stuff. In this evolution of medicine, it seems like obviously personal responsibility is going to be more and more of a factor. It's not so much people curing sort of a relationship between the patient and the doctor, and a sort of a guiding relationship. What is it about being on TV and radio that has sort of propelled your desire to do those kind of things?
About 25 years ago, I was invited to do a program for the American Heart Association on our local radio station, which was WCTC Radio in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And I got on the radio, and I'll never forget the feeling. And the feeling was, wow, I am going to be talking to 100,000 people instead of one.
Yeah.
And telling them to stop smoking, control your blood pressure, watch your sugar, and be careful with all of those things that produce heart disease. And that it really, something just clicked in my brain that said, I want to do this. I want to talk to more than one person at a time. And that's where, there's a gentleman in radio by the name of Bruce Williams. Okay. Bruce Williams was my mentor in radio. He's in the Radio Hall of Fame today, and actually lives in New Jersey, lived in New Brunswick. He was on WCTC Radio. And Bruce said to me, I'll never forget Bruce Williams saying to me, Derrick, people don't care that you're a doctor. They need good information, and don't forget, they need to be entertained. You need to be entertaining.
Yeah.
And I said to him, Bruce, I'm a doctor. How am I going to entertain them? He said, figure it out.
Yeah.
Figure it out. And I did figure it out. And the way I have continued my journey in radio, which is 25 years in radio this year, in 2014, and about 15 years on television, is to give people information that they can use today.
Okay.
I will talk to people about information, what's coming in the future, but on every show I do, I want to give them something they can do immediately now, today, to improve the quality of their life. And that's what I do, and that's what I continue to do, and I love it.
That's awesome, and it definitely scales out, and that's exactly why we're doing this as well, because the scaling potential of delivery information through the summit is something, and it's going to be international. We've got organizations endorsing it all the way through the English-speaking world. Some of it's being translated to Spanish. Really trying to take the word out there. So, in that light, you've given some great ideas for physicians on how to titrate people off medication, how to work with polypharmacy. You've given some ideas about what doctors can do to start to get on this train. Do you give us some for the patients who have listened to this, because they're concerned about that? Obviously, they need to be maybe doing the probiotics and vitamin D and stuff. But do you have any other words of wisdom that you haven't really communicated through this medium before, of the sort of the strategies for the general public to really avoid chronic disease and sort of stay out of the need for drugs?
I think the most important thing that the patients and the public, whether it be patients or doctors or anybody that's listening, to do is to start paying attention and give a darn.
Yeah.
If you don't care about your own health, nobody else is going to care either. The way you treat yourself is the way people are going to treat you. When you change your being, when you change your disposition, your energy, everything around you changes.
Yeah.
If you're loving, the world is going to be loving towards you. If you're caring, the world is going to be caring towards you. And that's what we have to evolve. I think our spirituality, I think our overall well-being. I take the time to pray every day, and I'm not telling you who to pray to. Who you pray to is your deal. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
But do the basics. Make sure you do pray. Make sure you do drink water. Make sure you exercise. Make sure that you take some basic nutrients. And be aware of every single thing that you're putting into your mouth. You know innately whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
And if it's bad, don't put it in your mouth.
Yeah.
Make a better choice. Don't listen to the media that says, before you go out and eat your burrito, take this prescription. No, that's the wrong message.
Yeah.
The message needs to be, don't eat that burrito. Make a better food choice. And that's what I'd like to leave you with, is do the basics, be aware, and pay attention, and give a darn. And that's what's going to make us all better.
That's great. So, Doc, all the way through the summit, I've asked everyone that I've interviewed, just, with the sort of the visceral relation or the understanding that you have, when I say the words, the evolution of medicine, what does that bring up in you?
It's the evolution and awareness that people are having today. It's that emotional, spiritual awareness that is changing our consciousness. It's how we are evolving into a better humanity. I think medicine, and it isn't just medicine that is evolving. My hope and my prayer is that we as human beings will evolve into better people, because I think there's a lot of room for improvement for all of us, including myself, to evolve into better people and have a greater consciousness of who's around us, what's around us, and just evolving into better people.
Absolutely. Well, look, I really appreciate you taking time to be here on the summit. We've had great speakers all the way through, and I just feel like what you've added today with looking at what's really core to sort of the areas in medicine that have sort of become bastardized from their original intention and been overused, and the sort of profit motives has taken over and taken us to a point where we're almost going to do some damage that we're not going to walk away from. I feel like that some of the keys that you've outlined today with the titration of patients off medication is really a key skill that most physicians are going to have to learn, and I really appreciate you sharing that in this format. Yeah, this has been the Evolution of Medicine Summit. You're on with James Maskell, your host. This has been Dr. Derrick DeSilva. Dr. DeSilva, what's the best way for people who want to know more about your work to get in touch with you and what you're doing?
They can go to my website, www.askdrdesilva.com. That's ask, A-S-K-D-R, DeSilva, D-E-S-I-L-V-A.com.
AskDrDeSilva.com. This is the Evolution of Medicine Summit, and we'll see you next time.